The Queen in the Mist. The morning air pressed down on Mill Creek like a suffocating weight. Thomas Harlow wiped his hands on his overalls, squinting across the fields. Something was wrong. The mist wasn't ordinary fog. It slithered along the ground like a living thing, curling around fence posts and climbing the corn stalks with an almost deliberate motion. James tugged at Evelyn's coat, voice trembling. "Mom! I hear my name," he whispered. Evelyn's hand gripped his shoulder tightly. "It's just the wind, sweetie. Don't listen." Clara froze, sensing movement at the edge of her vision. A gray blur with wet, dolphin-like skin darted between the stalks. Black, glassy eyes glimmered as it tilted its head at her, intelligent and feral. Then it vanished into the mist. Thomas tightened his grip on his shotgun. "Stay close. Don't step off the porch," he warned, muscles coiled like a predator ready to spring. By mid-morning, the town had begun to unravel. Screams echoed down the streets as neighbors bolted in panic. One man lunged for his wife, then a black tentacle lashed from the fog, wrapping around his chest and lifting him screaming into the white haze. Evelyn screamed, shoving James behind her as Thomas leveled his shotgun, blasting into nothing but mist. Shadows darted across the streets, dissolving before he could aim. The school bus roared past, brakes screeching. Children banged on windows, terrified. On the roof, gremlin-like creatures clung with unnatural speed, skins slick and glistening, mouths opening far too wide. They smashed through glass, dragging screaming children into the fog. The bus fishtailed, flipped, crushed metal groaning as it slid into a ditch. Blood streaked the asphalt. A single shoe spun away like a lost token. At a nearby gas station, a car had smashed into the pumps. Flames erupted, licking the sky before the fog swallowed them whole. Clara shrieked as a man sprinted across the street, only to be snatched by unseen hands, flailing above the asphalt before vanishing with a wet tearing sound. Thomas dove, shoving James low, narrowly avoiding another tentacle strike. The Harlows sprinted through the streets, essentials strapped to their backs, blankets, water, scavenged food, a rifle. Thomas pushed James ahead, shielding him, taking hits from shadows that struck like whips. Evelyn yanked Clara along, whispering precise instructions. "Left here, now right. Don't look down. Don't stop." The streets warped beneath their feet. Mailboxes stretched impossibly tall. Houses bent at impossible angles. Clara stumbled over a warped section of asphalt. Thomas yanked her upright, blasting at a gray blur that leapt toward them. It shrieked, high-pitched, wet, and vanished. Every turn brought fresh horror. Tentacles snatched neighbors, dragging them screaming into the fog. Blood ran in rivers down the streets. The smell of iron thickened the air. Voices, distorted, warped, mimicked friends and family, calling for help, drawing survivors closer. One moment, a man dived into an alley, screaming. Moments later, a tentacle whipped around the corner, dragging him back into the mist. Another neighbor froze mid-step, petrified, before a gremlin darted across the road and clamped its slimy teeth over his throat. Thomas fired twice, smashing the creature to the ground, but the man's body jerked once, then went still. By the afternoon, they had lost several minor survivors along the way. Bodies were pulled into the fog, shrieking, twisting, then disappearing entirely. The Harlows moved like a single unit, Thomas scanning, firing, shielding, Evelyn pulling and guiding the children. Clara's eyes were wide, filled with horror. James's face pressed against Evelyn's chest, shaking. A fire leapt from a destroyed car to a nearby building. Sparks ignited the dry grass, which sizzled as the fog swallowed the flames. Shadows darted in the smoke. A school bus roofed with gremlins slid past, its occupants screaming. Thomas shoved James low again, taking a blow to his shoulder as a shadow struck at his back. Pain shot through him, but he ignored it, yanking James forward. The streets continued to twist unnaturally. Sidewalks bent upward, curving into impossible loops. Streetlights stretched like long, thin fingers toward the sky. The family barely kept their footing, dodging rubble, avoiding tentacle strikes, and narrowly sidestepping gremlins that darted in impossible angles. Finally, the police station came into view, barricaded with desks, trash bins, and a patrol car. Shadows flickered in the windows. Scratches and muffled knocks echoed from the walls. Guns leveled as they approached. "Stop! Don't move!" barked a grizzled deputy. Thomas raised his hands, shotgun ready. "We're human!" Recognition flickered in the deputy's eyes. "Harlow! You made it?" Others checked faces, neighbors, friends. Relief mingled with fear. Outside, the fog hissed, tentacles twitching, distorted laughter echoing. Mimics lurked just beyond. Inside, survivors realized the police station was a temporary reprieve at best. The fog pressed against every wall, whispering, scratching, probing. The deputy pointed to the school bunker, a Cold War-era vault beneath the old school. Their only hope. Thomas's jaw tightened. "We move at first light. Stick together. No one stops for anything." Evelyn brushed damp hair from James's forehead. "We'll get there. Stay close. Follow me." For a fleeting moment, huddled together, the Harlows allowed themselves a flicker of hope. The town outside was chaos incarnate. Inside, they survived, for now. But the fog waited. Patient. Intelligent. And hungry. The temporary relief inside the police station was brief, like a thin, flickering candle in a hurricane. The Harlows huddled together, faces pale, hands clammy, ears still ringing from the cacophony outside. Every breath they took smelled of smoke and iron, mingled with the oppressive dampness seeping through the thick walls. Outside, the fog pulsed, curling and writhing like a living thing, pressing against the windows as if it could feel their very fear. From somewhere beyond, the muffled laughter of gremlins echoed, high-pitched and wet, followed by the soft, sickening slap of a tentacle testing the edges of the barricades. Thomas scanned the room, every muscle taut. He could see panic flicker in the eyes of other survivors, neighbors and friends alike, all huddled in terror. Guns were clutched tight, fingers twitching over triggers. The deputy who had recognized him looked pale, jaw tight. "We can't stay here. The fog, it's smarter than it looks." "We need to move," he said, voice low but tense. Evelyn nodded, brushing a strand of damp hair from James's forehead. Clara clutched her sleeve, shivering, eyes darting to the darkened corners of the room. Thomas dropped to a crouch beside the hatch to the station's side door. "We move tonight. No hesitation. Stick close. Nothing matters more than staying alive until we reach that bunker." The plan was simple in theory: exit the station, follow the warped streets through the heart of Mill Creek, and reach the school bunker, a reinforced Cold War-era vault built to withstand anything but the supernatural horrors now hunting the town. But theory had nothing to do with reality. The streets outside were a theater of chaos. Flames erupted from overturned vehicles, the metal groaning as it twisted into impossible shapes. Smoke and fog intertwined, creating illusions where shadows leapt with intent, stretching into shapes the mind couldn't recognize. Thomas was the first out, shotgun raised, muscles coiled, eyes scanning every flicker of movement. Evelyn followed, clutching James's hand and pulling Clara close. Behind them, the remaining survivors moved hesitantly, terror slowing them at every step. The moment their feet hit the warped asphalt outside, the nightmare escalated. A shadow streaked across the street, a gray blur moving impossibly fast. Gremlins lunged from rooftops and alleyways, their dolphin-like, glistening skin catching what little light remained. One leapt at a woman behind them, teeth snapping, jaw stretching impossibly wide. Thomas spun, swinging his shotgun like a club, crushing it into the asphalt. Blood sprayed in a fine mist, the creature's shriek echoing across the streets. The woman didn't survive. Tentacles whipped from the fog, coiling around another neighbor's legs. Screams tore through the air as they were lifted into the haze, body twisting grotesquely before vanishing completely. Evelyn yanked Clara low, yanking James behind her, forcing them under a collapsed streetlight just as another tentacle struck the asphalt where they had been standing a heartbeat before. The Harlows ran through streets warped and broken by some unseen force. Sidewalks rose like crests of frozen waves, street lamps bent at impossible angles, houses twisted into forms that made Thomas's stomach lurch. Every corner revealed fresh horror: a man dangling from a tentacle, a gremlin crouched atop a burning car, another body flailing as it was dragged into the fog. Evelyn whispered constant instructions, urging the children to focus on their feet, their hands, to stay close and never let go. At one point, Thomas swung his shotgun into a gremlin darting from the roof of a burnt-out car. The creature's body splattered grotesquely against the metal, but even as he fired, another lunge came from a shadow darting along the warped sidewalk. He ducked low, taking a sharp blow across his shoulder as a gremlin snapped at his arm. Pain flared, but he ignored it, dragging James forward and shoving Clara ahead. Time had become meaningless. Screams overlapped with the hiss of fog, the wet slap of tentacles, the high-pitched laughter of creatures, and the groaning of twisted metal. Smoke from distant fires mingled with the fog, creating illusions that made the streets seem endless. Thomas, Evelyn, and the children moved like a single unit, instinct guiding their steps, muscles and reflexes keeping them alive through a relentless gauntlet. Even as they approached the outskirts of the school, horror refused to loosen its grip. Veiled heads drifted low in the fog, black veils obscuring their disfigured faces, tentacles lashing and probing in search of prey. One brushed against a lamp post, cracking it in half with unnatural force. Gremlins darted along rooftops, leaping impossibly from one twisted house to another, their speed making them seem almost invisible until they struck. Finally, the steel hatch of the bunker appeared, partially hidden beneath weeds and debris. Thomas yanked it open, shoving James and Clara down first, then pulling himself inside. Evelyn pressed against the children, shielding them as the hatch slammed shut above. Outside, the fog pressed like a living tide, tentacles slapping and testing, the muffled groans of veiled heads echoing from every corner. Inside, the survivors huddled together, shivering, faces pale, breathing ragged. Food was sparse, water rationed. No one slept. The sounds outside, scraping, scratching, wet slaps, distorted whispers, made it impossible. Thomas patrolled silently, muscles taut, eyes flicking from wall to wall. Evelyn whispered to the children constantly, guiding them, calming them, hiding fear behind each word. Night pressed on with unbearable weight. Every shadow in the bunker became a threat, every whisper a potential harbinger of death. Hunger gnawed at them, exhaustion threatened to overwhelm, and yet, for now, the Harlows had survived. The fog waited outside, patient and hungry, but inside the steel walls, they were alive. For tonight. Dawn had barely begun to seep through the warped, fog-choked streets when Thomas gave the signal. The night in the bunker had been relentless. Every rustle, every drip of water, every whisper in the vents had gnawed at their nerves. Evelyn's hands shook slightly as she clutched the children's shoulders. "We have to move," she whispered, voice tense but steady. No hesitation. The tunnel leading out of town was narrow, damp, and lined with the remnants of old utilities. Rusted pipes clanged in the fog-heavy air above, water dripping steadily. Each step was a calculated risk, every shadow a potential predator. The Harlows moved first, other survivors following hesitantly behind, shuffling like frightened animals. The fog outside had begun to pulse, almost as if sensing their movement, curling into the tunnel's mouth like a hungry serpent. Thomas led, shotgun raised, muscles taut and ready. "Stay low. Keep moving. Don't stop for anything," he commanded, his voice slicing through the tense silence. The moment they stepped out into the open, horror met them like a wall. Veiled heads hovered in the fog, dozens of them now, their black veils obscuring disfigured features. Tentacles lashed into the tunnel mouth, searching for bodies, swatting and dragging survivors back into the fog with wet, sickening sounds. One survivor was snatched mid-step, flailing violently before disappearing. Evelyn screamed, yanking Clara and James backward, pressing them into the wall of the tunnel. Thomas fired repeatedly, each shot sending creatures skittering and shrieking into the fog, but for every one that fell, 2 more took its place. The survivors stumbled forward, slipping in mud and blood. The fog's metallic tang filled their nostrils. Each breath was thick with damp rot and fear. The tunnel narrowed abruptly, forcing the group into a single file line. Every sound was amplified: the scraping of tentacles, the wet slap of a gremlin on stone, the echoing wails of those already lost. Thomas swung the shotgun like a club, smashing a creature that lunged at him from the shadows. Evelyn yanked James low, screaming as another shadow darted for him. Clara tripped, Thomas catching her just before a tentacle coiled around her ankle. He ripped the appendage off, leaving a streak of glistening blood in its place, then shoved her ahead, heart pounding. At the tunnel's end, the nightmare revealed itself fully. The queen loomed, impossibly massive. A writhing mass of morphing flesh, spider-legged, grotesque, and exuding the fog itself. Her body shifted constantly, a sickening amalgamation of sinew, teeth, and folds that seemed alive. Veiled heads hovered around her, their tentacles writhing and probing, dragging victims toward her gaping, ever-changing form. The fog pulsed in time with her, curling into her limbs as if feeding her power. A low, almost inaudible frequency emanated from her central mass. It vibrated through the survivors' bones, striking at their very will. Hearts pounded, breath caught, muscles froze. Even the strongest instincts rebelled, yet an invisible pull forced them forward. James felt it first, his legs moving involuntarily, dragging him toward the queen despite every scream in his head. Clara and Evelyn struggled, shouting, trying to drag him back, but the force was relentless. Thomas raised his shotgun, aiming, firing at the tentacles and veiled heads, but every shot seemed meaningless. They recoiled briefly, then returned, faster, stronger. The queen's morphing mass rippled and grew with each body fed into her folds. Screams filled the fog, a cacophony that made the air vibrate, disoriented, sickening. James's perspective narrowed to the horror around him. He could see the survivors he had grown up with, dragged forward, fighting futilely against the pull. Their faces twisted in terror, mouths open in silent screams, eyes wide with disbelief. The smell of blood, of wet flesh, of smoke and fog, filled his nose. He saw Thomas and Evelyn struggle, push, and drag, but their strength was no match for the queen's frequency. Bodies were fed to the morphing mass, absorbed into it with sickening wet snaps. Screams became muted as they were consumed, the fog carrying the sound away. Veiled heads twisted, wrapping tentacles around the limbs of anyone who faltered, dragging them toward the nightmare at the center. James felt his mind screaming for him to stop, to resist, but his legs moved forward, compelled by the invisible pull. Every step brought him closer. He could feel the heat, the pulsating mass, the wet, sickening movements of the queen's flesh. He smelled the tang of iron, the wetness of the fog itself, the stink of consumed bodies. Everything familiar, every scrap of home, every memory of the town, was being erased in the haze. Thomas and Evelyn were the last to fall behind him. He caught a glimpse of his father swinging his shotgun, smashing a tentacle away, blood running down his arms, muscles straining to protect his family. Evelyn's face was a mask of determination and panic, screaming for him to stop, to run back, but it was useless. James's mind fought, but the queen's frequency overrode everything. The world narrowed to the morphing, writhing flesh ahead, the tentacles lashing, the fog pulsating, the screams echoing. All hope had disappeared like the town itself had vanished in the morning fog days ago. His last thought before being drawn into the queen's mass was a silent, hopeless wish that somewhere, somehow, this horror would end, even if he never saw it. And as the queen consumed the last of Mill Creek's survivors, the fog shifted, drifted away, and a distant, unsuspecting small town saw morning mist curling along their streets, shrugged it off as weather, and went about their day.